want you guys to think of your favorite franchise, movies or games. What do you consider the black sheep to be? Super Mario Bros. 2, Sonic CD, and Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link are ones I can think of off the top of my head. But when I say the black sheep, I'm not trying to use that in a negative light. Sometimes if a game is different from its peers, that can be a good thing. And I think I can say that about today's subject.
So like I said in the last video, the original Metroid managed to sell 2.73 million copies, and back in the NES days, that wasn't anything to scoff at. Despite the fact that the game didn't bring in Mario or Zelda numbers of success, another project headed by Nintendo R&D1 was greenlit, this time on the team's pride and joy, the Game Boy. Yeah, not only was R&D1 responsible for the Game & Watch, but also the mean, puke green portable machine. I know by today's standards this thing is kinda bulky, but I honestly would have loved to grow up with this as my handheld. I couldn't find too much information on Return of Samus' development, but I did see a few recurring faces from the previous game. Gunpei Yokoi returns once again in a producer role, with Hiroji Kiyotake as a designer, as well as Makoto Kano also taking up the designer title. Fun fact, this is one of the only mainline Metroid games to not have any involvement from Yoshio Sakamoto, but we'll see his grand return in the next game, which I'll save more about for when we get to Super Metroid.
We got a triple header for today's video, folks. Not only am I going to be taking a look at the original Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, but I'm also going to be taking a look at AM2R, or Milton Gosti's Another Metroid 2 Remake, as well as Mercury Steam's official remake of Metroid 2, Metroid Samus Returns on the Nintendo 3DS. We're going to go in chronological order in terms of game release today, so I'm going to be starting with the 1992 Game Boy original. So, let's jump into Metroid 2, Return of Samus. Before we get into the story summary, I do want to talk about something real quick. So, during the production for this video, I did actually manage to find a physical copy for Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, and while this isn't significant on its own, I did actually find a Super Game Boy for the Super Nintendo on the same visit that I found my copy of Metroid 2. For those that are around my age, or God forbid you're younger than that, the Super Game Boy was a peripheral for the Super Nintendo that allowed you to play Game Boy games on your TV. The add-on was able to give color to the black and white games about 4 years before the Game Boy Color hit the market. Now you may be wondering, Tabby, what the hell does this have to do with Metroid 2? Well, Metroid 2 was actually one of the games that was heavily marketed with the Super Game Boy. It didn't get anything special like a fancy border like Donkey Kong 94 did. I'm not using this footage as the main gameplay for the video, but I did want to talk about it since it was significant enough to me. I'm not against playing this again someday like this, and I am happy that I have the Super Game Boy and Metroid 2 in my collection now. But that's enough rambling about physical media. Let's jump into the story for Metroid 2.
Last time, Samus had infiltrated the Torian base on planet Zebes, taking out all the Metroids and defeating Mother Brain. And then no shit, aside from Metroid Prime 4, the entirety of the Metroid Prime series happens between then and Metroid 2. And I'm assuming with all the times the Metroids were brought back and mutated by space pirates, Dark Energy, and Phazon, that the Galactic Federation decided enough was enough and ultimately chose to wipe out the entire species on their home planet of SR-388. And in case you're wondering, aside from maybe one or two moments here and there, the Prime series doesn't really impact the main timeline too much. No matter what games happen, the Federation still decides to wipe out the Metroids. At first, they send some Galactic Federation troopers to do the job, but when they go missing, the Federation once more hires Samus to travel to SR-388 and wipe out all the Metroids on the planet. Surely this won't bite anyone in the ass later on down the road, but sometime after Samus arrives on the planet, she discovers that the Metroids are beginning to evolve into different forms. I'm not sure if it's because of the planet's environments or atmosphere or whatever, but thanks to something going down, Samus now has to compete with Alpha, Gamma, Zeta, and Omega Metroids, who are all immune to the Ice Beam, and can only be damaged with missiles. After traversing through many of the underground caverns and labyrinths of the planet, Samus manages to reach the Hive, where after encountering a number of larval stage Metroids, she comes across the Queen Metroid herself. With some yummy explosive bombs in her belly, the Queen is destroyed. As Samus begins to leave the nest, she comes across a freshly hatched baby Metroid who imprints onto her, thinking she's its mother. For whatever reason, Samus decides to spare the child, and surely there aren't any repercussions for this moment, right? Right? Well, regardless, Samus and the baby Metroid, who I shall name Jeff,
My name is Jeff.
return to Samus' ship and leave planet SR-388, and there you go. That's the story of Metroid 2. Fairly simple to understand. It's one of those premise-only stories and doesn't really dive into anything else aside from that, but I think it's serviceable enough. And while the story isn't anything too spectacular, the game itself is better than what I was expecting from an early 90s Game Boy title. Right off the bat, Samus can do pretty much everything she could do in the first game, but now she has the additions of being able to crouch and shoot downwards while she's in the air. And while I'm still kind of bummed that I can't shoot diagonally, I didn't mind it too much for reasons I'll get into soon enough. Though Samus can do everything like previously, her arsenal from the end of the first game didn't make the trip with her, so Samus will need to get all of her upgrades back. Thankfully, SR-388 has plenty of Chozo statues around to beef up your arsenal once more. You start with 30 missiles and Morph Ball right from the beginning of the game, so you can jump straight into the action. And if I really wanted to be a dick, I could say that Samus get the long beam too. All the power-ups from Metroid 1 return, including the Morph Ball bombs, the high jump, the screw attack, the ice beam, and the wave beam. One power-up I forgot to mention last time was one of the series' most iconic, being the Various suit. In the first game it increased your defense by 50%, and that's still the case here, but because this was originally made for a black and white display, the Various suit was given its iconic shoulder pads to distinguish it from the base power suit, resulting in the iconic look that Samus is best known for. On top of all the returning items, Samus has some new toys to play with. The Spider Ball lets Samus cling the walls and reach higher areas. This is a nice ability to have, but it's kind of overshadowed by another new item later in the game, the Space Jump. Infinite jumps. Enough said. My only problem with it is that it craps out randomly and I end up falling all the way down a vertical shaft or into enemies when I don't have the screw attack. Early on, Samus can get the Spring Ball. Oh my fucking god. Samus can also get 2 new beam weapons this time around. There's the Spacer Beam that lets Samus shoot her projectiles in a wider area, and the Plasma Beam that just eats through everything despite having a tinier shot overall. While beams once again don't stack, I didn't really mind it this time around, since I was able to get my mileage with all the beam weapons, and there's an area of the game that has all the beam weapons available to you in case you want to stick with a particular one until endgame. You will need the Ice Beam before you reach the final area of the game, but they give you another statue right before then, so there's nothing to worry about. One thing I think I can give Return of Samus immediate points for is the level design. While there are a few moments where there's some repeat level design, it's not nearly as noticeable as the NES game. As I said before, Samus will be taking out Metroids within the planet's caverns, but everything is sort of split off into chunks. Lava will block your progress to the lower spots, so you need to take out every Metroid in the specific area before moving on. I think the design for some of these areas can feel a bit rigid, but I felt genuinely rewarded this time during my exploration. Whether it's with new items, expansions to my health or missiles, or with one of the many life suckers that have run over the planet. The various forms of the Metroids are going to be the main challenge, and while at first the Alpha and Gamma Metroids can be a bit aggravating to hit, you'll learn their patterns in no time and take them out with ease. Zeta Metroids are my least favorite to take on because they zip all over the place and shoot fire at you. You can briefly lock Omega Metroids into a small stun cycle if you time things just right, but these things are damage sponges, so don't be surprised if you end up low on missiles and health by the end of an encounter. Thankfully, there are quite a number of health and ammo restore stations at a few different areas that can help whenever you need it. So as I said earlier, Samus needs to keep hunting down Metroids to go further and further into the planet, and since areas are separated by this lava flow that will dissipate after killing the current area's Metroids, you're limited to a single area at a time. So while this game may be a bit more linear compared to its predecessor, I don't think it's that bad. You don't have to get your items or kill the Metroids in a specific order. As long as they're all wiped out, you can move on. So in a way, you still have your non-linear exploration. If you're not a fan of Metroids, sorry to say that those are pretty much the only major enemies you'll come across in this game. There is this boss Arachnus that you fight before getting the Spring Ball, but that's the only time something like that happens. Every other time you're fighting a Metroid, so if you're not the biggest fan of it, sorry to say that you're not going to like most of the battles in this game. Return of Samus can also be a bit harder than the original game, and that's mainly due to your encounters with Gamma and Zeta Metroids. With Gamma Metroids having a weird weak spot and Zeta Metroids having unpredictable patterns, you'll need to stay on your toes, especially when you have to fight Metroids in room layouts like this. Fights like this were probably the low point for me in this game. By the time you reach the Metroid nest, you'll think that you're nearly done as there's only one Metroid on your counter, but as you pass this egg, the counter jumps from 1 to 9 as 8 larval stage Metroids enter the fray, all coming from the source, the Queen Metroid. She wrecked my shit the first time I took her on. I actually had quite a few game overs in this part of the game. But with enough determination, she'll explode into pixelated glory, and Samus is chosen by the Metroid Adoption Program. Come on, Jeff, my soap started at 6. I was able to beat this in under 3 hours, and again, if you finish quickly enough, Samus will take her suit off and pose like the badass she is. Why the bikini though? Did she have a spa day before this? Graphically, it looks damn good for the system. The sprite work kicks the shit out of Metroid 1, especially for Samus. I love this sprite for her. Even in black and white, things are pretty distinguishable from one another, though I decided to use the Game Boy Color filter on NSO, which was overall nice to look at. Musically speaking, though, it's pretty weak. That's not to say that there aren't enjoyable tracks here. Like, I love the title screen if you wait for a bit, and the main SR388 track is good stuff. But every other time, it's repetitive dramatic beeps and boops, or it's just random gurgles that got passed off as atmospheric sounds. Metroid 2 is a game I would have considered the black sheep of the franchise, and while it may not be entirely the same structurally when comparing it to the previous entry, it was a title I had quite a bit of fun with. Exploration was fun, the new items were pretty cool to mess around with, and it was a game that I was able to pick up and enjoy relatively well. Despite its more linear structure, somewhat repetitive encounters with Metroids, and overall weak soundtrack, I think I can say that I enjoyed this game more than Metroid 1. Sure, you're fighting a lot of Metroids, but there was never a time that I was bored when playing this game. It may not be the best in the series, and realistically it may not even be that fun, but I still liked it. If you haven't played this yet, I'd say give it a shot to see one of Samus's earliest adventures, but I'd say you're probably better off playing either of the remakes.
Speaking of, let's hop into the first of Metroid 2's remakes, AM2R, or another Metroid 2 remake. Now, this fan remake was developed by Argentinian developer Dr. M64, otherwise known as Milton Gosti. After being inspired by the Metroid series and other Metroidvania games, he began work on his project all the way back in 2008. He was primarily working on the game by himself, and after getting a few others to help work on it, the first full version of the game was available for download on August 6, 2016. But things didn't last too long, as shortly after the game was hit by a DMCA takedown from Nintendo. While I don't blame Nintendo for wanting to protect their intellectual property, this takedown was given at a pretty miserable time in the series' history. This was right after the announcement and release of Metroid Prime Federation Force, by the way, so fans weren't exactly happy with it. Though since everything always stays on the internet, I did manage to find a download link with a simple Google search, and I gotta say, after playing it again after all these years, I forgot how good this game actually is.
AM2R is for Metroid 2 what Metroid Zero Mission was for the original Metroid. Actually, if you love Zero Mission, you're gonna like this game a lot. Samus controls just as well here as she did there, power grip and all. It's not just a graphics and gameplay overhaul though. All of SR388's areas have received some tweaks in terms of level design here and there, not only to make for a bit more of a coherent experience, but to also compensate for new boss encounters, new mechanics, and new items from later games in the series. This game gives Samus the charge beam, power bombs, the speed booster, and the gravity suit to play with on top of all of her abilities from the original game. And they're all integrated in such a remarkably similar way to how R&D 1 was designed for their games. Mr. Gosti definitely did his homework when making this game, and I had quite a big smile on my face when experiencing this for myself. The Chorizo statue in Area 3 was a fun callback to Super Metroid, and while it growing wings and flying all over the fucking place was eyebrow-raising at first, I adjusted to the idea pretty quickly. Arrakis' fight is more entertaining here, and I love the idea of using bombs to launch him into these electric pegs. The whole escape sequence in the power plant was so fun, especially the fight with this tank thing on the way out. Fighting Ceres in the new distribution center area was a great time as well, though annoyingly I had to reset the fight by taking a death because once Ceres started shine sparking, the damn thing just got stuck in a corner doing fucking paraloops. That was the only real glitch of any kind that I encountered. This game is mechanically solid all around. I especially love the environmental design here, as the game takes the original areas and recontextualizes them as Chozo-related architecture. For example, Area 1 is pretty much SR388's equivalent to Chozodia from Zero Mission. There's this hydro station with a whole water system, a self-running industrial complex, there's a research site with the GF troops that went missing set up a temporary base of sorts, there's a whole mining facility, an R&D tower, and there are brand new areas exclusive to AM2R like the power plant at the bottom of the tower and a distribution center. It just expands on the world so much, and while it's not an official take on the planet, I love how creative they got with interpreting the original areas. What I'm not a fan of is how fucking aggressive Metroids can be in this game. Actually, the difficulty as a whole sort of caught me off guard. With how much Alpha and Gamma Metroids move all over the place, it's hard to hit their weak spots, and Gamma Metroids have this grab attack that knocks you down to a stun state that is pretty annoying to deal with. Zeta Metroids were made even more annoying this go around since they can swipe away incoming missiles and have this lingering poison attack, and their damage output is pretty high. For clarity, I played the game on easy mode because I remember normal mode being a bit of a kick in the nuts the last time I played. But the game was still a bit challenging, and even on easy, the damage these damn things were pumping out was a bit ridiculous. Though I'll fully admit, some of my deaths were because I was just stupid and bad. If you're new to the series, I would say maybe wait and play the other games first. I'm jumping the gun a bit here, but if you're looking for an entry point for Metroid, start with either Fusion or Zero Mission, and then once you're done with them, go for games like Super Metroid, Metroid Prime, and Metroid Dread. If you're someone like me who has played those games to death, then I 100% recommend you play AM2R, not only because it's a good Metroid fan game, but because it's a damn good game period. This is a Metroid fan's Metroid game. If you're planning on playing this at all, however, I ask that in some way you officially support the Metroid series by buying a copy of one of the Metroid games on Switch, whether it's Dread or even Prime Remastered or Prime 4. Support the official release so we can get more Metroid games. AM2R achieved so much as a fan project and is a beautiful update to the Game Boy original. Every pixel was brought to life with love and passion, and despite some gripes with the difficulty, especially concerning hunting Metroids, the world design and Samus's overall control is so fun and fulfilling. Again, if you're new to this series, I'd wait to play it, but once you have the other games under your belt, you're going to have an amazing time.
Finally, we have the official remake of Metroid 2, Metroid Samus Returns for the Nintendo 3DS. This one was developed by Spanish development studio Mercury Steam. They were originally responsible with collaborating with Konami for the Castlevania Lords of Shadow games, but after being approached by Yoshio Sakamoto to develop a new 2D Metroid game in the series, they were all on board from the start.
Originally, they wanted to remake Metroid Fusion, but Sakamoto pushed for a remake of Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, as though he never worked on the original game like I stated earlier. He believed it was an important entry to the series, mainly because of the story revolving around Samus and the last Infinite Metroid. So work began, and the game was eventually released for the 3DS in fall of 2017. To put that in perspective, that was the first year that the Switch 1 was on the market. Metroid Prime 4 got announced at that year's E3, and it was releasing at a good time for Metroid fans, as the last game that came out before this was... I ain't touching that with a 10-foot pole.
Know your fucking place, trash!
This also made fans a bit more understanding of the DMCA takedown for AM2R, because in the months that Milton Gosti was preparing to release his remake of Metroid 2, Nintendo and Mercury Steam were working on a Metroid 2 remake of their own.
It is hard to believe that it's been almost 10 years since Samus Returns came out for the 3DS, but now that we live in a world with Metroid Dread, does Samus Returns still hold up? Let's check it out.
Samus Returns approaches the original structure of the game pretty loosely. I'll be honest, there were only a few points where I recognized level design from OG Metroid 2, and as far as I'm aware, the rest of it is original stuff. I'm thankful that they took out the large vertical rooms you fought some Metroids in, and a few superheated sections were added to the areas to make things a bit more interesting, and to give even more worth to the Varia suit, as much like Super Metroid, it increases your defense and gives you protection from heat damage. Starting off, Samus only has 24 missiles, so you gotta grab the Morph Ball again, but it's not that big of a deal. Samus can hold down the L button and aim 360 degrees around her, and this is by far the best thing that Samus Returns adds to the franchise. I love how precise I can get with my shots, especially when I'm solving specific puzzles or fighting Metroids. She also has this new counter move that she can perform with the X button. Whenever an enemy is on the offensive, they can emit this white flash that Samus can swipe back to daze them, leaving them open for a projectile blast. I like it as another way to defend yourself, though it can be a bit pace-breaking sometimes with how often you have to stop to use it. A few of Samus's modern items made their way in as well, much like AM2R. You got your full kit from OG Metroid 2, as well as the Super Missiles, Charge Beam, Gravity Suit, Power Bombs, and the Grapple Beam of all weapons. I'm kind of spoiling a bit of my review for Super Metroid, but I didn't find the Grapple Beam to be too useful, but I really like how it's handled here. Not only can you use it to grapple to higher locations, but it can be used to pull on blocks for puzzles, and you can even use it on Zeta Metroids and pull their asses from the ceilings. By far one of the most satisfying things about this game. Especially after all the shit these assholes gave me in OG Metroid 2 and AM2R, this ass beating is a pleasure I can indulge in any day. Pretty much every weapon and item Samus collects gets some sort of use all the way until the end of the game, including the Spider Ball, which has this special technique you can use with power bombs to launch yourself in a specific direction. It's almost like the ball spark you could do in Zero Mission, only the game doesn't tell you how to do it, which is pretty annoying since you kinda need it for 100% completion. There are some other new abilities mixed in as well in the form of Samus's new Aeon Gauge. Throughout the game, you'll get these 4 new abilities that use this meter to assist Samus in a few different ways. The Scan Pulse reveals part of the map for you and also reveals hidden bomb or missile blocks that you can shoot out. A great resource for when you're item hunting or just needing a point in the right direction. The Lightning Armor protects Samus from damage by decreasing the Aeon Gauge instead of her health. You're mainly using it to get past this red brush, but I like using it in boss fights to survive for that much longer. The Beam Burst transforms Samus's arm cannon into a fucking Gatling gun that destroys everything. It's honestly hard not to get a power trip from using this thing, but it drains your Aeon Gauge like nothing else. Finally, there's the Phase Drift that slows down time around Samus. It's pretty much your Bizarro Speed Booster without a Shine Spark equivalent. I like the Phase Drift, but I still wish I had the Speed Booster instead. Progression in Samus Returns is much like the original game. Everything is of course split into areas that you need to scour in order to locate items and defeat Metroids in order to drain the purple flurp, I guess. And starting off at the beginning of the game, things are going pretty smoothly, and then the pacing shine sparks into the nearest power bomb door and comes to a screeching halt with Area 3. Straight up, this is the worst part of the game. Not only is every section of this area extremely big and spacious, but they introduce Gamma Metroids that love to leave whatever room you're fighting them in, and then you have to find them and fight them 1 or 2 more times. It serves nothing but to stretch out the game time, and it is by far the worst part of Samus Returns by a long shot. However, overall, I had a lot of fun fighting the Metroids this time around, even the Gamma ones when they're not leaving to grab the milk. The patterns are easy to grasp, and using the counter move at the right time does so much damage while Samus gets all flippity-dippity on them.
And look at Randy Orton slithering. Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out!
She's on badass mode throughout the whole adventure, and while I'm sure this was a response to the negative reception of Samus's character in Other M, which I'll get into more in that video, I think it really works well for this game. It pulls off what its predecessors did so many years ago, telling a story without any spoken dialogue, and it does that pretty well. Samus Returns is straight up one of the hardest games in the series, and there ain't no easy mode to help complete this bitch. Enemies are super aggressive in this game, some barely giving you any time to breathe. On top of that, the damage output is much higher than previous games in the series. It's not as much as, say, Metroid Fusion to jump the gun a bit, but I was losing energy tanks left and right in 3 or so hits. And even later in the game when you get the gravity suit, enemies can still do a third of a tank worth of damage, or in some cases, a whole tank. Master the counter as soon as you can, it'll definitely help in the long run. Sad to say that you're gonna pretty much be fighting nothing but Metroids for your bosses. I mean, Arachnus is here, but he was in the original game, so that's nothing too special. There is a new boss in the form of this Diggernaut thing, so this asshole will occasionally stroll along and take an item from a Chozo statue which you have to take back. The first encounter is a pretty tense chase sequence, though a few points felt too precise for my liking, especially using the grapple beam to get through a few parts. And then later in the game you have a traditional boss fight with it. It's fine for the most part, but the last part that has you blowing up these weak points with the spider ball was annoyingly inconsistent. I got more enjoyment out of seeing Samus rupture this fucker's eye than beating the boss itself. Queen Metroid is certainly a challenge once again, but I honestly didn't die to her as much as I did the Diggernaut. I gotta say though, the finale after killing the Queen Metroid is awesome. So you're on your way back to your ship with the baby Metroid, right? But right before you leave, Ridley descends to the planet and takes the baby Metroid, and you get a one-on-one with Ridley. I know to some it's too out of nowhere, and it somewhat diminishes his return in Super Metroid a bit. But I had the biggest smile on my face the first time I fought him. This is by far the best Ridley fight in the series. I absolutely love how he still has some of his metal bits from his meta form in the Prime series, and seeing the baby Metroid help Samus out during the fight was a nice callback to Super Metroid. Or is it a call forward, or... This fight alone is what got me excited for Metroid Dread. A good game overall, though there are 3 main points of contention I have against it. One is Area 3. Like, straight up, fuck that place. It's too big, too bland, and the game of Metroids can eat my ass. Secondly is that it does run a little long for a Metroid game. My first playthrough was about 6 hours, while my 100% run I did for this video was a little under 8. While I don't mind the game being a bit longer, it also just felt a bit bloated at times. Thirdly, 100%ing this game is a bit of a slog. You have to wait until you get the baby Metroid to travel back to previous areas and break away these stone blocks to get like 1 or 2 items in an area. It's not as bad as going for 100% in Zero Mission, but I still wasn't too entertained by the idea. Samus Returns was the shot in the arm that the Metroid series needed back in 2017. In a post-Dread world, it's easy to take this game for granted, but I still think it's a game that is worth your time. It's a good interpretation of the original game, and while its pacing and difficulty could possibly stray players away from it, it was still a title I had plenty of fun with. It's not my favorite Metroid game, it's not even in my top 5, but I still like it a lot.
The big question I know some of you are probably wondering is, do I find AM2R better than Samus Returns? I do think overall AM2 is better, but I don't want to discredit Samus Returns for what it did for the series. This game showed the world what Mercury Steam was capable of if they were to keep the keys to the Metroid series in their hands, and a few years after this game's release, we got to see their full potential. Again, if you're interested in playing AM2R, support the Metroid series in some way, shape, or form to balance the scales. That was a lot, but I'd rather knock all 3 of these games out for one video rather than give each game its own individual video. And besides, all these games are short enough, I can put them all together and it's not that big of a problem for me. But the next time we meet, we're going to be taking a look at the crown jewel of the Metroid series. So I will see you guys next time with Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo. So until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm actually going to throw it to myself in post-production for a special announcement. Hi everybody, welcome to post-production. Thank you guys so much for making it to the end of the video, and I want to apologize for taking so long to get this out. I've been playing a lot of Pokopia recently, so now you know when this video is recorded. But this channel just recently hit 100 subscribers, and I'm just absolutely blown away by all the support that you guys left for the Metroid video. So thank you guys so much for that, and thank you for 100 subscribers. To celebrate, we are going to be doing a 100 subscriber Q&A. In the description for this video, I'm going to be leaving a link to a Google form sheet that you guys will be able to go in. Make sure to leave your username and leave your question in there. I do have a few rules that are listed in there, which you can check out by clicking the form and reading them yourself before answering. The deadline for this is going to be April 31st of this year at 11:59 Eastern Standard Time. When it rolls over to May 1st at midnight, I'm going to be collecting all the questions and then getting started on making that video. So again, cut off April 31st, 2026 at 11:59 Eastern Standard Time. And then the video will go up probably within that week, either before the Super Metroid video or after the Super Metroid video. It depends on when I get it done. So again, I hope you guys check that out, and I will see you guys next time when I take a look at Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all again soon.